And good evening, everyone. Thanks for tuning in today for the Bike Advocacy Roundtable discussion. Tonight, we're kicking off the 18th annual Filmed by Bike Film Festival. The 18th annual Filmed by Bike Film Festival is an annual celebration of the world's best bike movies. Typically takes place here in our home city of Portland, Oregon at the gorgeous, historic Hollywood Theater. But this year, we've shifted our focus to online events for obvious reasons, and we'll be launching on September 10th, going all the way through the 13th with a series of bike movie nights celebrating the world's best movies, bike movies, with films from all over the world. We have a collection of about 70 films that we'll be showing. It's a really stellar lineup. We had everything ready to go for May, and we've been working on it for quite a long time. So we can't wait to release this collection of films to you to enjoy. A really great opportunity to sink into the couch and watch live, join the chat window, or later at your convenience. You can always go back to those shows later. Tickets are available on our website at filmbybike.org, and we thought it would be really fun to kick off the festival with a series of pre-festival events. So you can check out our website at filmbybike.org or the playlist here on YouTube to see who else we have in the lineup coming up tomorrow. We're going to be talking about adult BMX bike culture with Dean Dickinson, who his film Poolside Announcement is in this year's festival, and some of his cast and crew will be joining us for that event. We've also got Rugail Caladite, who put together a film on Lael Wilcox and her epic adventures on the rugged road. She'll be joining us on Thursday. So lots of great stuff to come. You can check out the playlist to see all the different filmmaker Q&As, bicycle filmmakers will be interviewing, and learn more about what's coming down the pike for the 18th annual Film by Bike. Tonight, we wanted to kick things off with probably the most important conversation that we'll have throughout the fabric of the festival. Film by Bike exists as a film festival that hopes to motivate people to ride their bike and do it in a way that's super fun and super inspiring by tapping into the creative genius of our filmmakers from all over the world and curating their films into inspiring film collections with a little bit of something for everyone. But we'd be remiss to embark upon this journey if we weren't to have the very obvious needed conversation about the lack of diversity, equity, and inclusion within the fabric of bicycle advocacy. As long as there have been bike advocacy organizations, there's been quite a lack of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Many people have felt left out of the conversation. They've felt that the programs did not speak to them, and they didn't feel that they necessarily had a place at the table. So with the racial justice reckoning, it's been a wake-up call for a lot of people in a lot of different industries and realms, and for people personally. It's also been a wake-up call for the bicycle industry and for advocacy organizations. So tonight we wanted to assemble a collection of experts from bike advocacy organizations all throughout the United States to get their ideas on what's happening, their personal thoughts, their organization's thoughts on what they've typically done historically, what they're looking at doing into the future, their hopes and dreams, where we're missing opportunities, where change could happen, and how we can get there. So I want to invite on our guests to the program. We have a really packed house tonight. I also want to remind you that we have the chat window available. So if you're tuning in on YouTube, let us know where you're tuning in from. We want to hear from you, and feel free to ask questions along the way. We won't be able to quite get to all your questions or read off all your thoughts and ideas, but we'll do our best to get to as many of them as we can. So joining us here from Bike Walk Tompkins, we have Hector Chang. He is the interim program director there in Ithaca, New York. From our hometown here in Portland, Oregon, we've got Sommer Martin. She's the communications manager of the Street Trust here in Portland. Also joining us from the League of American Bicyclists, we have Torrence Strong. He sits on the board there, and he's based in Fort Worth, Texas. Thanks for joining us here, Torrence. It's great to have you. We've also got Brenda Hernandez-Torres. She is coming to us from the Bike Coalition of Greater Philadelphia. She's the Community Engagement Manager. Super important to be talking about that tonight. I'm so curious. And also Caila Brown with Bike Walk Savannah, the Executive Director there in Savannah. Caila, thanks so much for joining us. Well, you guys are an awesome mix of people, and I want to thank you for giving of your time tonight to share your thoughts, your expertise, your ideas. And I thought maybe we would kick things off with each of you going through and just telling us a little bit about your organization so people have a good understanding of the scope of programs you usually do and what your focus is as a bicycle nonprofit. Let's do that same order I introduced you guys in, and let's start with you, Hector, talking a little bit about Bike Walk Tompkins.
Yeah, Bike Walk Tompkins is the bicycle pedestrian advocacy organization here in Ithaca, New York. We're a small town of around 30,000 people in upstate New York. And generally, before COVID, we did a lot of big open streets events. We did community outreach with our Ithaca bike champions, and we also did just bike fun stuff like have a Streets Alive film festival where we have film by bike films shown and just fun rides like Halloween rides, lighted bike rides. Definitely this year has given us some room to rethink our programming because one, it cleared our Open Streets Festival schedule. Usually those are very well attended to the point that they're really close together. People are really close together, so we felt like it wasn't safe enough to do that in this instance. And we've been doing a lot of more work in the bike access side of things, making sure that people still have access to bicycling in this current challenging time when there's high demand and very low bicycling supply. And we're also starting to rethink our engagement with our communities of color. Our bike champions have been our first foray into that starting in 2017. So 2017, and we thought we were gonna kick it up a notch this year, but we're saving that for 2021 and thinking how that goes. But that's basically it.
Great, thanks. Sommer, give us an overview of the Street Trust here in Portland.
Right. Hello. The Street Trust, we were formerly the Bicycle Transportation Alliance, and we just made the change to fit our scope a few years ago. But the Street Trust works in classrooms, on the streets, in the city hall, and the state legislature to encourage and advocate for safe and convenient walking, biking, and public transportation options. We want to see a community where everyone has access to safe and affordable and equitable transportation options. And so that means like advocating for policies at the local, regional, and state levels to address safety. And some of our initiatives include Safe Routes to School, which is like we help kids get to school safely. And then it's like Jumpstart, where kids are riding bikes, walk and roll. It's like an Oregon walk and roll encouragement program. Also, Rules of the Road clinics, free presentations. We have We Bike Portland, which is open to all trans people of all genders, non-binary, people who enjoy biking and think they want to bike. And also like Oregon Friendly Drivers, which is like an interactive class to educate all drivers on the best and safest ways to share the road with folks. So if you want to know more about the Street Trust, you can visit us at www.thestreettrust.org.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up. I have the links in the show notes below. I have links to all these great organizations, and I would encourage you to check them out, follow them on social, and stay abreast of the great work that they are all doing. I'm glad you brought that up. Thanks, Sommer.
Thank you. And if you tweet or Instagram or whatever, I'll be the person that responds to you.
Now we can put a face to the socials. That's awesome. And Torrence Strong joining us from Fort Worth, Texas. Torrence sits on the board of the League of American Bicyclists. Tell us a little bit about what the focus and mission of the League is. I think Torrence might be frozen there. We'll see. We'll give him a second to see if he unfreezes. Oh, there we go. Are you there, Torrence?
You and I, the League. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. It was cutting in and out, but I think you're good now.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah, just a brief overview. The league did start in 1880,
Wow.
and at that time there were no women allowed. It was white men only. So we don't hide from that. We always mention that because that's how we gauge our progress as to where we are now. It open to everyone. Literally anyone that wants to be a part of our organization. Open arms, you're welcome, and we're here for you. And what the league wants to do right now is remind the world that we are EDI focused. And that's easy to say as a buzzword. And so what we've done with our Bicycle Friendly America programs, which is bicycle friendly businesses, bicycle friendly universities, we've actually weeks ago, we went back and we adjusted some of the language because what was not being factored in, and it's all documented that a lot where African Americans live, there are higher amount of tickets written for, say, not riding your bicycle on the sidewalk, starting a stop sign. These are individual privileged, let's say, to bicycle-friendly courses, to classes, and predatory police who just sit at a stop sign in a community where there are no sidewalks, and you write a ticket for no sidewalk, for not riding on the sidewalk. It's like, well, hey, you know what? The buck has to stop somewhere. And like I said, we had that conversation about 2 weeks ago. We recently updated our EDI policy, and that's available on the website as well. So the league, we just pride ourselves on being at the forefront, and being the tip of the spear, so to speak, as far as justice and equity and equality when it comes to cycling in America.
That's awesome. Thanks, Torrence. Your connection is cutting in and out a little bit. I'm hoping it improves, but if you do have an option to move maybe closer to the router, that might help. I just want to make sure that we don't miss out on anything that you mentioned when you chat. So, but otherwise, if that's the best spot in the house, then we're just going to work through it because that's what we do these days. So thank you. And Brenda, moving on to you at the Bicycle Coalition of Greater Philadelphia. Tell us a little bit more about what you guys are focused on.
Yeah, it's so great to be on this roundtable with amazing people to work with. Before, I know that I met with Hector. I met Sommer probably like 2 years ago when I actually went to Portland. You probably might see me. I was blonde at that time. We changed colors during the season, so don't worry. Bicycle Coalition, here we were founded probably in 1974, around that time, 1972 to be correct. We've been an advocate, to make sure that everybody in all Greater Philadelphia and also other regions, especially in Camden, can get around in bicycling, and making bike fun, right? Through advocacy and education, we make sure that we leave the movement to make bicycling safe and fun, a way to get around for everyone in Greater Philadelphia. That means that we do a lot of advocacy when it comes to transportation and infrastructure. A lot of people don't understand that when we talk about biking, it's way more than just getting people across from, bike and green spaces, or, your traditional just people who wants to use it for recreational. To be honest, Philadelphia is a region where we really great place, where we really internationally, here we have multiple diverse communities, and we want to make sure that we interject with every single one of them. So when we talk about biking with those communities, we're just not talking about biking infrastructure, and also like just for greens and just to get around. We actually talking about transportation methods to get them to equal opportunities. That comes when it comes to hungry, when it comes to healthy, both mental and body. We are connecting them to resources that the city of Philadelphia offers. And we also talk about what some infrastructures or changes should be made for the community, with the community, right? A lot of advocacy groups has mainly focused on fixing streets, which is great. Yes, we want to fix streets, but we want to fix the streets with the communities, also engaging the isms that we have all around. That means and fighting the system oppression that we have. I want to make sure that every single time we are connecting those communities, we actually acknowledge what's been happening historically, and then when we move forward, we want to make sure that we do it in the safest and greatest way possible. With that being said, we have a lot of programming. We had the the Bicycle Coalition Youth Program, which is been great. We have a lot of honorees there, a lot of youth who has been successfully been with us from the beginning of high school years into like graduating and going to college. We have done a lot of policy work into like intersecting Vision Zero into Philadelphia, which is the Philadelphia's one of the cities that passed a bill to make sure that we build better infrastructure and making sure that we build bike lanes, but bike lanes are successful in making sure that we connect in all neighborhoods and not just like one specific neighborhood, and making sure that we create policies to help communities and not be against them. But when we work with those policies, we want to make sure that we actually are intended to work with them and for them and not the way around, right? And we do a lot of like the Better Bike Share Partnership that I know Hector and I met through that. And also a few of you guys probably have seen me and talked and did all this pep talk before. And lastly, we have Folks and Spokes, which is before it was the Women Bike PHL, but now we have changed it to make it more inclusive with the community, especially, not a lot of people identify as women, but, for everybody's that can definitely identify into that. So there's a lot of work and things that the coalition have done. And I'm just starting. This is probably my 5th year with them, and I'm still going, guys.
I love that 5 years is just starting. that's your baseline there. Really, we all know with nonprofit work, the work is never ending, and it feels like you haven't done a lot, even if you have, because you probably have a million ideas for what more you would love to be doing.
That's correct. Especially when it comes to like a lot of work that I have done before it. I actually started off working as a youth advocate. And then that was probably when I was 18 years old. And then I moved into mobility justice, which was way different from, immigration justice and documented justice and, human rights into a different branch of that social justice that it comes to. And a lot of people don't realize that mobility justice does form part of a social justice. It does create that path of connection. And I think my movement, or especially me connecting communities, is also resounding that word of like any form of social justice, or it's also fighting for the same, for the same things, as long as people are intentionally doing it. So if it's not, they're not doing their job right, and then we need to start being inclusive about it.
That's awesome. Thank you. So Caila, at the in Savannah, tell us a little bit more about your organization and what you are focused on.
Yeah, so hey y'all, we Bike Walk Savannah, we were founded in 2008 as Savannah Bicycle Campaign. By 2 guys who both had cargo bikes, and they saw each other on the street and they were like, "What? You've got one, I've got one."
So many bike organizations start with that exact story, I think.
Yeah, and then you had like 12 people met in a basement. It went on from there. So, we do a lot of encouragement. Pre-COVID, obviously, we had a lot of in-person events and rides. We transitioned to Bike Walk Savannah in late 2018, so we've officially been BWS for almost 2 years now. And, both bike rides and walks. We do education classes for children and adults, and during COVID actually launched our bicycle and pedestrian-friendly driver webinars, which have been doing pretty good. And we're looking actually how we can implement that with our are also understanding why people on bikes make the decisions that they're making, and hopefully make our streets a little bit safer. We have a pretty high student population, but our city population is actually throughout the year anywhere from 110 to 140, 140,000 people. So we're a fairly small city, and as such, we don't have a bike and pedestrian planner at the city level, and so our organization kind of serves as that for the city of Savannah. We work on a lot of advocacy policies and programs and projects with the city. So recently we finished greening some of our bike lanes, and that was helped along with design from our organization, which is a really great opportunity. We do virtual rides and walks now, mostly walking around my neighborhood, but one of the big programs that we have is called New Standard Cycles. We take in donated bikes from our community, fix them up with the help of volunteers, and then provide them to people who are in need of transportation. Previously, we used to just work with service agencies, But during the COVID-19 pandemic, they reached back out to us and said, we have people who need bikes and need to get around, but we can't handle all of the requests that we're getting in. So we work with individuals temporarily. I'm hoping that we'll be able to work mostly with service agencies, but we got in about 185 requests in the last 6 months, and we've been able to do 80-ish bikes so far. So that's been our main focus during the last few months, but we're looking to do some more virtual rides and get people out and encourage them to keep biking. We've had so many people in our community start biking or start walking around their neighborhood during the pandemic just because they were looking for something to do. And so we're really hoping that we can kind of continue that trend.
Excellent. Thank you. It was great to hear more about what all of you are working on. Torrence, I wanted to let you know you shifted your camera view and that looked great. So I don't know if you're working on stuff there, but right now we don't see your video, but it was looking great when we had you in that vertical format. So do whatever you need to do. We're here. For folks who are tuning in, we want to let you know that you can join in on the chat window. We've got a couple folks asking questions there. Feel free to let us know where you're tuning in from. We always love to know who's watching and where you are tuning in from, what biking is like where you live, what bike advocacy organization you're a member of in your community. And we'd also love to know more about what's on your mind. Feel free to ask questions of our guests that are here. We'll get to as many of them as we can throughout the show. And thanks for your great question there, Sean. We will get to that, but first I want to dive into some more of the meaty stuff in the conversation here. And I wanted to hear from each of you guys or any of you that want to chime in on this. Just anyone that's got an idea, feel free to pop in here. But I'm curious to know, like, right now, given that we have the racial justice reckoning happening, and we know that bike advocacy historically has not been as diverse and inclusive as we would like it to be. So what are those conversations that are happening around the table at your organizations, in your offices, wherever you're working from? I'd love to hear from you guys what you guys are talking about these days in the workplace. And feel free, anyone can jump in. Otherwise, I'll call someone out. How about you, Hector? You guys, sounds like you guys have started to make some shifts. And you're a great chatter, so you know.
Oh, I'm thankful. We're starting to make some internal moves first. So what we did in the very beginning was come together with our transportation providers. For those of you who don't know, Tompkins, I'm sure you don't know, is also in the same place. We're part of the same organization as Ithaca Car Share, so we have very strong links with other transportation providers, such as our transit system and our city. So the very first thing that we did was to really state what the transportation provider community was feeling at the time and put out a statement committing ourselves to, at the very least, some serious introspection. Transportation has usually been a flashpoint issue in some of the recent events, like when you think of anyway, but there's a lot going on there. But basically, at the very least, we've committed ourselves to really start doing holding talks amongst our transportation providers to see how we can move towards racial equity and being anti-racist in the way that we do our work. And we're organizing workshops that leadership, especially within our transit system, have committed themselves to attending. They're going to start very soon. It's taking a little while to organize them. At the same time, we've been encountering some issues where the way that we would have approached our work is a little bit different. So two things that come to mind: we're currently writing our essentially strategic plan based on the Bicycle Friendly's community format, one of the chapters being enforcement. So we're taking a really hard, close look at that and see what we said. We already knew that we weren't going to rely too much on policing in that chapter, but really examining the language and our intentions to see what kind of solutions or kind of actions can we take that take traffic enforcement out of the police's hand, or at least think about it not being mainly run by people, by law enforcement officers that where traffic stops, for example, have been a real issue for people of color across our country. And the other thing that also came up, and it's a more local thing, is recently we've had a big rash of bicycle thefts in Ithaca. And we've had some interesting conversations between our staff as to how to approach it and how to engage essentially the police again on this particular issue of bicycle theft. We haven't come to any great conclusions. If anything, kind of like our background research shows that the main perpetrators of the massive theft have been people in what we call in like a homeless encampment close to the city of Ithaca, and have been differences of opinion on how heavily involved the police should be in this particular issue, because we've been hearing a lot of stories of people, for example, a grandmother at a low-income housing complex, like saving all her money to buy a tricycle to just have it stolen like a couple days after. So it's really trying to see how to really balance these two potentially explosive issues, frankly, and finding ways to work with our elected leaders to see if there's some sort of middle ground that we can reach to try to get bicycle theft, disencourage bicycle theft without necessarily using law enforcement's or punitive approaches of law enforcement on an underserved population. So yeah, I'm happy to get ideas on that too, but it's interesting how it has affected work that we would have otherwise kind of like done a particular way, the way that we would have otherwise done. So
what about for some of the other folks? What are you guys, what's happening around the table? What are you guys talking about?
I'll go.
Oh, go ahead, Sommer.
Oh, you sure?
By all means.
Well, at the Street Trust, we're like moving towards more of a transportation justice organization. And my co-worker, who also doubles as my friend, Richa Pudyal, she's actually working together with the Getting There Together coalition to work on getting some bills on the ballot this November. And we're also working on how are we going to tackle this whole defunding the police in terms of public transportation. I mean, yeah, in Portland, we had that incident with the max stabbings. Like, yeah, we get that. And a couple of people, passed away because of that. And people are kind of like pushing back on we need to have law enforcement on public transportation, but not understanding that was an isolated incident. And there are people of color like me who actually get nervous when the police get on public transportation, or they always ask me for my ticket. Like, it's like always a struggle. So we're kind of like working on that as well. But for the most part, we're working on rebranding a lot of things. We had a shift in leadership, and now we're kind of doing more of a collective, and we're going towards more of like bolder action and being on the front line and really like putting our name out there and fighting for transportation justice and DEI, of course.
Speaking as a local, I'm really excited to hear about that shift in bolder actions, because I've been so, as a cyclist on the ground, I've been so eager to see that from the Street Trust over the years. And I won't get too hyper local here, but I am really excited about that. And Film by Bike is really here for you, the Street Trust, to amplify your messages and to bring you into the conversation more. That's why we're partnering with you guys this year and the last few years, because we just want to be here for you to help the locals understand more about the great work that you've always done. So thank you for those updates. I'm so excited to hear about all that.
Thank you.
Brenda, what were you thinking? You were just about to jump in there as well. I'm so curious to hear what's going on at your organization.
Oh, just put me on the spot. I lost my train of thought for a second, but no worries, I could catch up. We've been trying our best as in like the coalition, not only internally, but intentionally, as I mentioned, and also how do we also engage with our partners and making sure that we engage them right. The beginning, I guess, for the coalition part, we always want to make sure that um, our staff is really really represents the community that we actually advocate for. How to do is ooh, that was the mic. So we do a lot of like advocacy work, but also hiring processes. We want to make sure that we hire the right people, but also hire the people that definitely can benefit from it. So really want to be really representative. Also, switching our boards, our board members. We want to make sure that board members are actually people who have been, advocating for us, who also have been putting a lot in the words for the community, by the community. So, really diversifying our board members is really one of our biggest part. And then our program, and we want to make sure that our program are intentional. When we do that, we want to make sure that we really are engaging with those communities. But also, like during COVID right now, we want to have a quick response to the people that we serve. We actually serve. Once we heard COVID happen, we are like in the works trying to figure out how to continue programming to make sure that communities are able to be out there in those green spaces. And we made it possible to cross the MLK Drive, where it was the greatest opportunity from like our policy squad, who did shout out to them, who did an amazing job, also with Sarah Clark Stewart, who was our executive director, who was able to get to a petition to be signed up for community members to be able to use MLK Drive. And that's a long road. That's one of the roads that's connected to the circuit. And when we talk about partnerships, similar to our trail partnerships, the circuit trails and other communities, we want to make sure that they are also engaged into those to communities, not just particularly the communities they feel interested at their best, but no, intentionally, if those communities are where you're going to build those trails, we want to make sure that you start and make those connections and making sure that you are doing payments. And it was a really interesting thing, though, because we are forming part of like not an issue, but kind of like a conversation, right? When it comes to trails, there's a lot of people who are afraid of opening more trails because of the reason that they talk about being mugged or being, robbed or anything like that. And the biggest question that was asked to me was, should we get police involved? My answer was no. There should never be police involved in the beginning of your conversation. It should never be your first top priority. It should be always education. Then it should be, what's best practices. And if you are engaging with communities, and there's communities who can really be involved. There are like on town watches who actually do a lot of work with youth and a lot of work with the community and do like book drives, do coat drives. They're the ones that you want to engage to. So we want to be really intentional when we are actually calling out on our partners, because it's so hard to also work and trying to make the work for yourself, but you want to make sure that you are out there and you are expressing what what should best practice be. And I'm the person that they could call it a devil's advocate, but to be honest, I'm like, what's your intentions? What do you want with this community before even me putting that community to you, right? And then after that, I want to make sure that that community is being compensated about like the energy that they put to the organizations, because one thing, we get paid to do that work, right? But communities, they don't get paid at all to do that. So we want to really make sure our intentions are right, and we do not apply our agenda towards them. We want to make sure that we work with them with their own agendas to make sure that we are empathizing with the whole entire community, to make sure that we are unified and not just working and saying the diversity just for our values and something that the organization has, but no, really be intentional, not just internally but externally when we do a lot of outreach.
Awesome. That's so great to hear. Caila, I'm wondering about if your organization in Savannah is having any conversations related to shifting priorities and focuses, or if you have any different approaches that you will be taking.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so to start it off, apparently Savannah was a little ahead of the curve on reducing traffic stops. We had so few police officers doing traffic enforcement that they would actually publicize where they were going to be to stop speeders in advance. Don't know how it worked, but we haven't had a ton of traffic stops, so we're obviously pushing to reduce those. You know, our programs have always been rooted in that social justice and mobility justice, and so it wasn't as much of a transition and change for us. We've always been working to make sure that our communities are heard and that we are, you know, putting in bike lanes and sidewalks in places that don't have them and don't have that access, but desperately need that access. It hasn't always worked up until this year. We've actually had a lot of success, and actually, earlier today, the city of Savannah just announced that one of their 2020 to 2021 priorities is to develop an equitable bike and pedestrian plan, which we never would have heard on previous councils. So that's really great and good to hear. You know, we're working to diversify our board. We are predominantly white, predominantly male. And so we're working to diversify the voices that we have on our board. Our staff, we have one full-time person who's me and one part-time person. So it's a little bit more difficult to try and further diversify that. But as we look to hire additional people, that's always going to be top of mind. You know, one of our biggest programs is a collaboration with about 40 other organizations within the greater Savannah area. We recently were awarded a CDC grant for racial and ethnic approaches to community health. So that's through Healthy Savannah and the YMCA of Coastal Georgia. They're partnering with this grant, and one of the big focuses is access to multimodal transportation and making sure that that's dispersed throughout our communities, especially our low-income communities of color. And so we're working to develop a better framework to work with the communities rather than and publicize their and push their voices rather than tell them what they need. You know, working with our Black communities, working with our grandmothers, working with, you know, our community leaders who have been, you know, working with these communities, have trusted voices, and making sure that we are effectively, you know, helping them. There's no point to working, like you said, Brenda, working, you know, coming into communities and having ulterior motives. You know, we want to be able to push their voices and amplify them rather than speaking on their behalf.
Yeah, thank you. So Torrence, I feel like you guys have such a big role at the Bike League because you are one of the leadership organizations. You know, everyone here at the table has such important work in their own communities, and I know you also do important work in your own community. But as a board member for the League, I'm curious to hear what sort of conversations the League is having, if there are any changes coming down the pike at the League, and kind of what thoughts the League has had on how best to be a support resource for all these other organizations, whether that's through hosting conversations or providing tools and resources, or just kind of keeping the conversation going, and any adjustments y'all might be making at the Bike League.
Yes. Fortunately, I'm able to travel a little bit. So what I do is I go out and I meet with advocates around the country. And instead of, you know, say, hey, someone says, hey, the League is in DC, and they're just making decisions and not aware of what's going on. So I go out and I try to meet with as many organizations as possible and find out what needs to be done individually in a particular area, because everyone knows you can't use a broad brush to solve these issues. So what works in Lincoln, Nebraska is not going to work in Portland, Oregon, is not going to work in Los Angeles area or the state of Georgia. So that's what we do is we gather information and we brainstorm. We brainstorm. We have various committees and we try to just see what works. And we welcome outside input. We're open to that. Right now we have an individual from Chicago that we've been talking with, and and we've taken some of his ideas into consideration. We've actually implemented a few of those. Like I said, it's been maybe 2 weeks where we just put out an entire new different program, an improved program as far as EDI. And because once again, it's like, hey, we're a national organization. Sometimes it's easy to get lost in that as far as, hey, we're over here and they're over there. So directly, what I've made it my mission to do and what I ran on was being able to get out and face to face and meeting with individuals around the country.
I love that. I think that's great. We've got a couple great questions in the chat, but before we get to that, I don't want to miss this opportunity, Torrence, to have you tell us about the challenge that you launched today.
Oh, yes. Well, first I want to apologize. There's a huge storm blowing through Fort Worth right now, so
man.
everything is all wonky. But
Okay.
yes, so it's called the virtual10.org, the virtual10.org. And what that is, it's designed for long-term, getting everybody mobile, moving around, walk, ride, or run. And so what you do, there's no money coming to us. That's number one. We're not raising any money. But what we're encouraging individuals to do is to join our club on Strava, and it's only for bragging rights. And people that support you and your cause, you ask them to donate $10 per mile. So we're trying to get everyone to be involved in 10 miles of activity per week. And this is going to coincide with the absence of football. So if you're a fan of Team A, they're a fan of Team B, you can, go out and get those miles in. And that's, like I said, the leaderboard comes through Strava. Everything is all computerized. It's just a way to motivate, because we didn't want to do a one weekend challenge where people get excited and they're standing around like, what next?
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it kind of feeds into this conversation, because we all love to be mobile. We all love to ride. We all love to walk and be active. And come Monday morning, just sitting around like this, hey, well, what do I do now? Who's going to start another challenge, or who's doing an organized walk? It's like, well, there's not a season for that. So this was just a brainchild of trying to get the community active, and along the way have some fun. And you reach out to people that and say, hey, you know what? If you could donate to my organization, $10 a mile, $1 a mile, whatever it is. So it's not about the giving as much as it is about being mobile and being active. And we want to establish some long-term habits for that. So, like I said, we just launched that, social media, hashtag the virtual 10, Facebook the virtual 10, Instagram, same thing. So if you guys could connect with us, help get the word out. Obviously, it's a nationwide situation. And once again, no money comes to us. The goal is what you guys are doing, is getting our communities involved and being mobile.
I love it. That's awesome. I could use all the help I could get to be mobile these days. There's something weird about quarantine. Just keeps me inside even when I could go outside. Like what? Great comment in the chat here, or question from someone who does sit on boards. Jude is wondering, she's curious how you change a board culture. There are so many nice white people out there, and this has to be exhausting for a lot of you working on great issues. So how can we support a positive culture shift? That's a big one, but I know you guys got some great thoughts on that one.
Who wants to say something first?
Yeah.
Terrence?
Yeah, I'll take it.
Yeah, go for it.
And that is a brutally honest question, because and I actually ran my platform when I ran was changing the face of the league and making the league look more like America. I mean, and for me that sums it up. But there will be pushback. There will be pushback. Be confident in what you're talking about, and be sincere in why you're bringing that position. And our board, honestly, we've had people to say, hey, man, you know what? We're excited about what you're talking about. Hey, my time is up. I'm not going to seek re-election, because I believe in the mission of the organization. And that can be challenging sometimes. For some people, it's a power struggle. Thankfully, I haven't had a direct situation like that, but we have been rotating some individuals off and bringing in new faces, fresh ideas. But as far as a direct answer is, just be confident in what you're talking about and be informed, because you don't want to bring in someone that doesn't have an interest in your organization. To me, that's suicide. If I'm not going to ride a bike, then I don't need to be just a face in there that looks different. So vet your candidates and be sure that they understand the purpose, and the purpose is to be a voice of change.
How about some of the rest of you?
Yeah, I mean, I think as you build a board or as you transition a board's mission or your organization's mission, there are going to be people who fall off. Like you said, there are going to be people who rotate off simply because they do not feel like they can effectively advocate for your mission. I think the true culture of changing your board's values or addressing that value change comes with how you term that organization change. We have some board members who, if you ask them personally, do they necessarily agree with defunding the police, or do they necessarily agree that we should just be a social justice organization or a mobility justice organization, they may not come out and say, I personally am going to, fight to the death to see this happen. But when it comes to how we have been able to word it as an organization, they wholeheartedly believe in what our organization is doing and accomplishing. And so, it might not be something that they bring up at Thanksgiving. I'm working to change that for them. But, they are still agreeing with what we're doing. And if they haven't, we have had a few board members who stepped off, as things change and as, organizations grow, sometimes people just leave. I think, another huge thing for us, especially in forming our board, was realizing that, and especially for the well-meaning white people of the world, you don't have to reward every single person who is supporting your organization with a position on the board. We went through that. We're a small organization. Like I said, we have one full-time staff person and one part-time staff person, and we have the ability to have up to 15 people on our board. We do not need that. That's so many, cats to herd. And, we see that in a lot of organizations. The more voices, the more your message can get diluted in some cases. So, you don't have to give every single person a seat on your board. Reserving those spaces for people who are supporting your organization, are supporting your mission and your values. It makes a huge difference in how that board is made up.
What about for the rest of you? Any thoughts on shifting a board culture?
I just want to say I agree with everything that was just said between both people. I agree wholeheartedly. I feel like having too many well-meaning people on a board is a recipe for disaster. I do not think that a board should be in the 20s. I feel like there are too many cooks in the kitchen, and some people need to go. And I think that there are some hard conversations that need to happen, but the board, like Torrence said, the board has to reflect the world. And if it doesn't, then some people need to go. And I know that some people are on boards because, it makes them feel good, or they like to feel important, or they want to do something for whatever the case may be. But you have been there for X amount of time, and it's time to give someone else a chance. You do need fresh voices, you need fresh perspective, and if you don't, your board is going to remain stagnant and archaic, and it's going to be an imbalance between the board and what people actually want.
Yeah, and let's hope that some board members are out there listening to this conversation, or will tune into this conversation later, because this is archived. Share it with everyone. Just a great reminder for people who think they're doing the right thing by being on the board, but maybe their efforts could be used elsewhere to step aside and make space for other folks at the table, especially if they've been there for a long time. Come on, everybody likes some freshness, right? So anything to add to that, Brenda? I know you were agreeing with a lot of what has been said so far.
I agree with every single thing that's been happening. Why have I not gathered with you guys earlier beforehand? But I love it because we always want to fight that status quo. It's always talk about in the beginning of who represents our board members, right? Also, ages really reflect on the things that are coming up. We're 2020. And we shouldn't be talking about boards at this point. We should be talking about what reflects our community, right? When we talk about swifting and trying to move this language of the amazing white savior and stuff like that, we gotta realize, right? There are a lot of things that are happening. There's a lot of movements, and as an advocate, but also an ally, that you can either add room, leave room, and also provide that room for people that don't and cannot afford it, right? I love one of an amazing community member, but also an amazing advocate, Dwayne Drummond, says that we should invite people in the community to be board members, but not just because we want to utilize and tokenize them, at any point. No, we actually want to, if we want to be intentional about our work, we want to make sure that we are communicating and we're inviting people to be part of it, to be part of what's happening in their neighborhoods, what's happening in their city, what's happening in the state, right? And also intentionally, if we can't afford to pay them, or people in boards or sitting on board seats who are being paid in for-profit organizations, we want to make sure that they're the right people to get and paid for the work they're doing, right? But lastly, I think just intentionally, we want to make sure that the best way I put it, and the best way that Dwayne put it, is that if there are trainings to be board members, and there's scholarships from different organizations. In Philadelphia, we got Chang involved in the leadership program that does a lot of prepping to become a board member. And those things look great on a resume, but listen, it's not just about resume. It's about really connecting that community. That's the efforts that you have to do. And if you are so pro about being an advocate, I suggest you, if you have the money to give a scholarship to somebody, hey, by all means, that white person that can afford that scholarship can give that to a person who actually benefits from it. I always tell people that it really, intentionally, are you supposed to be there, or can you share that information to somebody who could benefit best for? So, with all that being said, I really I can go on for hours and teach lessons about this, but honestly, it's just the intention that it works and how you really advocate for this, the community. And there's a lot of things that people can do best, and either clean the kitchen a little bit, protect other people, because we want to make sure that the right cooks are cooking for the right people.
Yes. So I want to shift a little bit about what we're talking about here. How we message what we're working on makes such a difference. And we have Sommer here as a communications focused staffer at a nonprofit organization. I know when I looked at some of your websites front and center, I saw statements that just spoke to diversity and inclusion and just made your organization seem welcoming. And those statements weren't buried under a mission statement page. They were front and center. And that really resonated with me. That's why some of you are here today. I'm wondering, just to kick things off with some ideas from you, Sommer, if you have any hot tips or quick suggestions on what you would convey to other organizations on ways they can approach their communication strategy, their social media, their newsletters, or their websites, or anything else that helps more people feel welcome in the sphere of the work that you're doing.
Great question.
Sorry to put you on the spot. I couldn't resist while we have you here.
It's okay. I would say, first of all, read the room. Be aware of what's going on in the news. Be aware of what's going on in the community. And then when you have that information, have a conversation with staff, with board members on what to say and how to sort of craft a message. Because here at the Street Trust, what we do is something happens, and then I may start a document, and then I open it up to all the staff members to kind of put their thoughts in, and then we kind of go through and do an edit before we put it out, just so that we don't miss anything and that we're touching on the subject and we have a clear and concise message that everybody can kind of relate to. And nowadays, we're not really afraid of saying how we feel, especially me being a Black woman. I also push the button. Right? So as a Black woman who is pushing the button for the organization, I have to feel some comfort, or I have to feel something with the messaging that's going out. So we put a lot of time and a lot of effort to draft up comms and have conversations before anything goes out nowadays.
That is so awesome to hear too, because we're such a fast-moving culture, and I feel like a lot of organizations, especially nonprofits that are strapped for resources, don't take the time to do that. And I love hearing that is a focus of your organization.
Yeah, and you said that we're a very, very small nonprofit. We have a few people, and everyone has 2 and 3 jobs that they have to do. But when it comes to something like #Black Lives Matter, For me, it affects me. It affects my coworker Judge. It pretty much affects everybody on the staff, but we pay attention to the thing, and then we take the moment, like in our day, to add to the document. So we don't all do it at once. Everybody has time to process the information, and then they write what they feel, what they want to say or convey to our audience, and then that's where we go from there. But it's a collective sort of communication strategy that we do.
Anything else that the rest of you would add to those great ideas that Sommer's provided?
I love writing, but I also like going to somebody's organizations, whatever it is that they have, and makes it seem like it's me, right? Representations, it's always a must. And honestly, I'm not a thin woman. I'm a thick woman that really loves to ride a bike. And honestly, if I see just like a skinny person on a bike, that that gives the wrong image of who actually been on bikes. I want to make sure that whatever I'm watching, I can reflect on. If not, then we really need to work on our communications. Also, language barrier is the biggest issue, in our community. Like I said, Philadelphia is one of the, diverse communities, and we have a lot of people that have different languages here. We got Spanish, we got Vietnamese, we got Mandarin, we got Russian, we got Portuguese. We have all these different languages, and we try to give the educational part. And also what we try to, as if we have a staff on board that can translate for that, great. But also we do have the city of Philadelphia that offers, the Office of Language that can offer, free translation. So if it's, open for the public, or sometimes, we reach out to organizations that does, translations, but obviously a charge. Right. I do want to say to nonprofits or other, planners and other planner commissions that do translations through, to reach a certain audience. You want to make sure that you're paying those organizations translations, right? Because I love that we want to reach out to the staff member because they speak another language, but don't forget that we need to acknowledge that that person speaks and writes another language, and that should be another job description, and that should be paid for. But that's a different conversation. But it should be reflective of what communications be. And if that person who's communicating is communicating and translation must, that pay needs to go a little higher up. Not just your basic, but a higher pay.
Yes to that. Well, you guys, we only have a few minutes left in the program, and so we could go on and on all night, and I really wish we were all in the same room together because y'all are amazing, and it would be so great to see you in person. But I appreciate you all taking your time to share your expertise and your knowledge and ideas and your feelings and passion for bicycle advocacy and transportation equity. As we head out of the program, I would love to hear from each of you a little bit about, what is your dream? Like, what does this new world, what would it look like? What can it look like? What will it look like with the efforts of folks like you at the table? Let's dream big. Like, give me a little description of what that looks like for you. So I'm a believer in manifestation and action, real action, alliances, partnerships, and hard work. So if we're not envisioning it, if we're not painting that picture, it's hard to get there. And I want to hear from you guys. What does that picture look like for you? And any one of you can jump in. I would love to hear from all of you.
I'll start.
Thanks. Great.
Yeah, for me, literally a bicycle-friendly America, but not just bicycles, but more people out being engaged. I am in Texas, so there are more large, pickup trucks and stuff like that. But just having more people out in the communities, out walking to the corner store. Everything just overlaps, with each other, and it is the work that we're doing now. But for me to just see families walking up and down the sidewalk just brings me so much joy. So if I could get that on a larger scale, I would really feel like we've accomplished something.
How about for the rest of you?
You're asking so much.
I know.
No,
I know.
I think,
Or it could be a sketch. It doesn't have to be the whole portrait.
I see a picture of like zero reduced vehicle accidents. I think zero deaths, and people really being held accountable from like what has been happening with those deaths. Undocumented and migrant communities who have been not mentioned in the media about like the accidents that have been happening when it comes to mobile crashes and stuff like that. But more than that, I will say an expansion of bike lanes, but that can actually connect communities from different from northwest, southeast, but people are actually using it intentionally for them. And lastly, I will agree, more green spaces for underserved communities, because honestly the places that have green spaces are the communities who actually being gentrified, right? I want to make sure that there's no food deserts anymore. I want to make sure that we're reaching our Black and brown folks about mental health and that stigma of like people not suffering from mental issues. And I want to be able to still make a big changes and still continue to fight that oppression and the systematic oppression that we have, and actually make a difference in this whole entire world. And even if it's one branch, but we're starting from there and then rooting up. So
Yes. How about the rest of you? Anything you guys would like to add to this beautiful picture that we are painting?
I guess I'd like to see, I like to see us working towards more programming that is more inclusive, that really feels like, that really builds a community in addition to just being in ways to encourage people to go bike. Like a survey that we recently did shows, and I'm like a data geek basically, so I'm just like, survey says. But a survey that we did shows that, not everybody says that bicycling skills is, only 30% of people said that lack of bicycling skills was like a barrier for them to bike. So it's not a lot, but then when we dug into it, it was like primarily women, primarily people of color. It was very interesting to see that was like a particular barrier that people of color and women found. Is like a discrepancy between them and white men, for example. So doing more programming to really empower those communities to be to really get on bikes in a way that feels comfortable to them and safe to them. So that totally explains why our bike lessons have been mainly attended by women, particularly women of color. And that's not even like intentionally pitching it as such, but I would like us to get to the point where there is a group of people that kind of of women of color that introduce people to bicycling as a way to get around, get groceries, or like go to the workplace, or whatever it is that they need to do to get around town and feel as if they're part of something bigger than just riding a bicycle, for example. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm seeing.
Sommer, anything you'd like to add, or Caila, that you would like to add to this?
Yeah, I think for Portland in particular, I just want BIPOC folks to feel safe. When I speak of BIPOC folks, I'm speaking in general terms, but however, I'm speaking more so about Black women. I want folks to be able to like walk in a crosswalk and not be afraid that somebody's not going to stop because of the color of their skin, or not be afraid to get on the max because somebody's going to try to stab them to death, or get on a bicycle and you're riding on the Esplanade and you're running off the road because some like avid 60 plus white van is like going through really fast. Like I'm being for real, right? Like I just want us to feel free and to feel like we're not like relegated to just one section of Portland. Like Portland is for everybody, and we deserve to be there, and we deserve to feel like we can be free and not be in fear.
Yes. Caila, any parting thoughts from you?
Yeah, I mean, it's all of this. My kind of what I envision is our community where people of all ages, backgrounds, and abilities, feel safe and welcome wherever they're going, no matter what mode of transportation they're using. And it's, helping people in our community who have different transportation needs or different levels of access to transportation, making it so people who previously would have driven have the opportunity to choose to bike because they feel safer doing so, but also people who have no other choice but to bike or to walk to public transportation or just walk, feel that that is the safe option for them, so they can reinvest, in other things to improve their quality of life. It's just really making sure that our community actually feels like a community. It's, a safe and welcoming place for everyone without all of the isms. And so that's kind of what, if my neighbor could feel safe biking to and from his job, not only because there's a protected bike lane there, but because he doesn't have to worry about systemic racism. He doesn't have to worry about what's going to happen if the police stop him or pull him over. That's going to be a great community.
Well, I want to thank all of you for joining us here tonight. It took some time to get everything set up, and I want to thank you all for the time that you took to get here. Also, I want to acknowledge that we've never had this many guests and things go so smoothly, so clearly y'all are great at what you do. This stuff isn't easy, but it was amazing getting you guys all hooked in. I also want to recognize that it takes energy and emotional work to have these conversations, to give of your spare time to be here with me tonight. I want to thank you for that, because the words and the ideas and thoughts that you've shared are so important and so valuable, and more people need to hear this. It's been great having you at the table tonight. And again, I want to remind everyone that this conversation does not end tonight. This link is available for other folks to view. Share it around. Give other people the opportunity who could not be here at this exact time, at this exact moment, to tune in and to listen to this conversation. Also, down in the show notes, you will see information on all these amazing guests. Follow them on social media, engage with them, like their posts, amplify their messages, connect up with them. We had some great questions in the chat we couldn't get to that were a lot of logistics on running bike advocacy organizations. So link up with each other, get to know each other, share resources. There's no reason we should be reinventing the wheel, though, of course, programming for our local communities. And you guys all have some great ideas that would definitely extend to other areas. So I want to thank you all for the good work that you do on a daily basis to make transportation and specifically bicycling more accessible, but also for being here with us tonight. Thank you all so much for joining me.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
So this has been the kickoff, if you will, to the 18th annual Film by Bike Film Festival. We are moving to a virtual event this year, and we've got a lot of great programming planned for you. September 10th through the 13th is the actual festival. We're kicking things off with a happy hour, moving into 3 days of movies, and that is all available at filmedbybike.org. Make sure you get your tickets there. Coming up tomorrow here on YouTube, we're going to be talking to Dean Dickinson about the adult version of BMX bike culture and talking about his latest film, Poolside Announcement, that we are going to be showing at the 18th annual Film by Bike Film Festival. Thank you all for joining us here tonight. Again, the link that you are looking at right now here on YouTube is shareable, so be sure to get the word out there and spread the love. Thanks all, and have a great night.